Let us cleanse this ground, brothers.
Why the need for such haste?
There is no sin in performing one's duties efficiently, brother.
Speed does not replace diligence.
Hello, as always, I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be reviewing Warhammer 40,000 Deathwatch, which is a turn-based strategy game developed by Rodeo Games. Now, Rodeo Games, of course, are renowned for developing pretty solid mobile titles, and they were also the developers behind the Warhammer Fantasy game. Now, Deathwatch was originally a mobile title which has now been ported to the PC. The game received very positive feedback on mobile devices, and the game has now released as an enhanced edition, trying to signify some of the changes that have occurred with the port. Now, we all know that mobile ports are well known to be traditionally bad, and often these are bad in varying degrees, but they're still bad. And it's clear coming into this that after the experiences of porting Warhammer Fantasy and taking note of the wide variety of complaints PC users have with mobile ports, Rodeo Games have not only brought the game to the PC platform, but have instead decided to remaster the game specifically for PC players. I have to say that in my opinion, the port is a fairly good one. First, the controls and the UI have been redesigned for a keyboard and mouse. The entire game has been redone using Unreal 4 engine to improve the graphics and textures, which also allows for better lighting and effects in all the levels. The one issue I have with the top-down camera is that the port has made it temperamental at best. If you move it too much, it will just go off in any old direction and it can become a severe annoyance. I think the camera does need some work, and I think what they should have done is actually just change the camera completely to more of a tilted top-down camera rather than keeping the same camera that was in the mobile version. One of the biggest and most important aspects for me, especially with the port, was the free-to-play model of the mobile version. In the game you have card packs to open which give you new weapons and new Space Marines. Most mobile ports create a huge amount of animosity with PC players, not only by keeping exploitative free-to-play models in their PC ports, but often charging a higher base price for the game on PC, and then still keeping in microtransactions. It's fair to say that this type of business practice often leaves me indignant. However, thankfully, Rodeo have completely removed all microtransactions from the game. In its place, you can gain Imperial points to purchase these card packs, and these points are simply earned by completing the missions in the game. It's certainly refreshing to see a developer completely removing their microtransactions from a mobile port, and hopefully it will set an example to others. Now let's get on to the game, because after all, just because the port is fairly good doesn't mean that the core game is. Now the game's premise is that you control a Deathwatch kill team who are fighting against a Tyranid threat. For those unfamiliar with the Deathwatch, they aren't actually a separate chapter of the Space Marines. They are an arm of the Imperial Inquisition, whereby Space Marines from all the other different chapters are hand-picked to serve in the Deathwatch for a period of time. The Deathwatch tend to engage in very dangerous and unusual missions, however it is considered a great honour to be selected to serve. There are essentially two main sections to the game, the combat section and then the progression section. Now the combat is turn-based combat that works around action points. It's very similar to the XCOM games, and the player essentially takes a turn being able to perform actions using up each individual unit's action points, and then the enemy's turn will follow once the player ends the turn. Each level can have a couple of objectives, such as defend a location for a number of turns, or plant bombs and then get to an evacuation zone. Levels are not particularly large and they do often feel constricted. However, this does on occasion work to the game's advantage, as it gives the feeling of being in a confined space, such as a space vessel, with vicious Tyranids in front and behind you. Now the combat is fairly simple, but it is enjoyable. Space Marines have abilities and they can gain more through weapons and progression. As you would expect, you can field an array of Space Marines, including the Tactical Marine, Devastator, Navigator and Assault. Veteran Marines are also available, who tend to not only be stronger, but also have more progression options available. Your Marines loadout will not also have any effect on the available abilities, but it will also have an effect on tactics. For example, plasma weapons can overcharge after one shot, which can essentially leave that Marine defenseless for the entire rest of the turn. Overall, I think that the combat does the job nicely. I really dislike the camera angle, and I would really like the developers to have changed it. The combat isn't complex, nor is it deep. But it is enjoyable. It is what it is. It's fairly simple, it's straightforward, and it's a nice little turn-based combat system that doesn't really take too much effort to get involved in. After the successful completion of a mission, you'll be returned to the main menu where you can then access the progression menu, which is essentially a character screen. Here is where you can spend all of your acquired XP and equip your kill team with new equipment. Experience points can be spent in several ways. Firstly, you can level a Space Marine, which will increase a main stat, or you can spend that XP unlocking abilities or slots for war gear. Space Marines, depending on their chapter, will have different abilities, so it's always best to field a variety of Space Marine chapters. New Marines and weapons can be unlocked by unlocking the card packs. There is a good array of weapons available, and as well as different rarities and chapter specific equipment that is also pretty powerful and is fun to collect. Again, similar to the combat, the progression system is fairly simplistic, but it is fun, and it is fun to collect all the weapons and the different Space Marines, and you can also rename your Space Marines, which is a lot of fun and can be sometimes hilarious. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the game was completely remastered in the Unreal 4 engine for PC, which has made the actual character models look a lot better than they did in the mobile version. Some of the level textures have been improved, certainly the lighting and some of the special effects have been improved, but I think overall it still looks, it doesn't look fantastic, but it looks okay and it does the job relatively nicely. I think that the weapon animations have been massively improved, especially with like the bolter gun and the plasma rifle. They look a lot better than they did on the mobile version. However, much of the graphical fidelity of the game remains mediocre. However, the sound of the game is great. I really enjoyed the sound. The bolters sound great, the plasma weapons sound great, the voice acting was actually pretty impressive, and I have to say I was quite surprised at how good it was. It felt okay. The actual writing of the scripts was pretty solid and sounded very much like Space Marine should sound. I particularly enjoyed while in battle, Space Marines would talk to each other about the mission, and they would ask questions of the Inquisition, and then the others would tell them to be quiet because you can't question the Inquisition. And it made for a fairly enjoyable experience. It was a nice little add-on to what was already there. One of the major issues of the game for me is the longevity of the title. Now, there is no skirmish mode, there is no multiplayer mode, which is something that I would have actually liked to see, because I think multiplayer mode could have been a little bit fun, or at least a skirmish mode. The major problem is that once you've actually completed the main campaign, the only thing you have available to you after that point is a higher difficulty of the campaign again. So you have to rerun the campaign several times, which means rerunning the same mission several times. And you will actually have to do this to earn enough points, to earn enough packs to be able to gain some of the achievements, especially some of the chapter specific collection achievements, like collecting all the Blood Angels, war gear, etc, etc. You probably will have to run the campaign several times to be able to get that. Which sounds very tedious to me. That is something that does not appeal to me, especially with hardcore. You know, I do enjoy hard difficulties, however hardcore modes and stuff like that doesn't particularly appeal to me as a gamer. I think that especially with how simplistic the combat is and how confined the levels are, and essentially there's only so many ways you can do stuff in this game before you're doing the same thing over and over in each level. I feel that it would become very repetitive and very annoying very quickly after doing the campaign maybe more than twice. And I think that it's a bit sad that the developers didn't add in a skirmish mode where you could basically earn the points that you need to buy packs. rather than having to do those same missions over and over again. I think the game overall is a solid turn-based game. It was a solid turn-based game on mobile. It's a solid turn-based game on PC. The developers do get props for the port. It is not perfect. I think that the camera just needs removed and replaced. And some of the UI choices are fine. Sometimes it can be a little unresponsive at places, but it's never really bothered me. But I think that, for things like, redoing the game in Unreal, redoing the UI, having a really good attempt to satisfy PC players is really important, and it's something that I'm appreciative of. But the biggest for me was the removal of the free-to-play model and the removal of microtransactions in the game, because that is just the complete right way to go, and it means that I can focus on the game rather than trying to get exploited by microtransactions. So I'm really pleased about that. With all that in place, the core game and then the actual fairly decent port on top of it and the removal of the microtransactions, I can say that it is probably worth the money at this point. I think that if you can get this on sale, definitely pick it up on sale, because it's definitely worth it. Otherwise, if you really want this game, then go right ahead and buy it, because it is a fairly solid game and it's not going to nickel and dime you all along the way. So props to Rodeo for the port. It's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than most developers get their mobile games into. So that is my review of Warhammer 40,000 Deathwatch. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Do like, subscribe, and leave a comment, and I will see you guys next time.